Item 4.1 is a presentation from Assessor Terry Johnson relating to the duties and revaluation.
And Councillor Van Sickle has asked to introduce the assessor.
Yep, thank you, Mayor Payne. Just a couple of words on behalf of President Ellman, myself. And thank you to Terry Johnson for being with us here tonight. We have had a really deliberate conversation around getting to know municipal operations better and the people that make those worlds go round. So it's not to be patronizing in any way to the department heads or the council, but to make an intentional opportunity to learn more about, like I said, our city and the people that make it happen. So similar to the TIF presentation that we had about a month or so ago, this will be ongoing and regular. And the point is to have an educated, informed council, because sometimes there are departments that we don't always interface with or get to know. So this transition seemed like a really good time to ask Terry to come visit us, and he prepared a presentation for us. I don't know if I could, off the top of my head, give a bullet point about what you do, but hopefully by the end of this we all can. So again, you'll see more organizations and directors and whatnot visit us a lot this year. So I hope it's helpful, and if you're ready, thank you, Terry.
Thank you, councilors and mayors, for the opportunity to be here. It is one of those things that we try to be behind the scenes. As I told the mayor when we give our things for the upcoming year, we had a camel mash. We like to be in the background, hidden. But the basic work that we do is to value and classify all the properties within the city of Superior only. So those are that's our boundaries of what we do, and that involves the real estate, which is what they term real property, the land, the buildings, and everything that's on it. And then the state in Wisconsin has personal property, which would include things like mobile homes in city-approved parks, things like furniture, fixtures, and equipment, which would be normally in some type of a business, improvements on leased property, which is publicly owned. All the hangars that you might see over at the airport, those are taxable. And then there are other businesses that are on publicly owned property that are leased as well. So those are all taxable. The idea behind it is that they're not having a competitive advantage over another business when they are, on leased land versus something they own themselves. So hopefully those are equally and fairly assessed as all the other similar businesses. And then we also do some things with tenant improvements on leased or rented properties as well. The only thing that we really don't do in the city of Duluth, or Superior, I came from the city of Duluth, so you'll forgive me there. Exception is that the state does the manufacturing of classified real estate and personal property. So the state is responsible for all of those properties, which would include some things like the refinery, maybe some of the manufacturing businesses around town, and that would include the personal property within those. They come up with the value of those. We can, if need be, make an argument if we look at those values and say, hey, that maybe it should be adjusted, but sometimes they're doing their own valuation method for those types of things. And all this stuff is covered in the Wisconsin State Statutes under Chapter 70, and also further defined in the Wisconsin Property Assessment Manual, all of which, the statutes are in the Wisconsin State Statutes. The Property Assessment Manual is available on Department of Revenue website. Now, a typical assessor has two jobs. The two major services they provide is preparing the assessment roll, which is the value of all the properties, granting exemptions, filing reports to the Department of Revenue, and monitoring the assessment performance, which is basically our sales ratio of all the properties they're selling for this price, but here's our value. The second is to discover and classify and value other properties that may be out there that we don't know. So that maybe there's somebody did a split or something was missed or something like that. Sometimes things go from exempt to taxable, a lot of different scenarios. We're all guided by the same professional standards and practices, and the state has licensure requirements for certain levels of Assessors, level 1, level 2, level 3. I'm a level 2 right now, and only the first-class cities are required to have a level 3. So, the third service we provide, which is not typical for an assessor, we are the property lister for all properties within the city of Superior. And what a property lister does is we get the splits. Somebody who has a parcel and they want to split it off, or they combine them, okay? Or they might do a whole plat or something like that. We have to review those legal descriptions, make sure they're accurate, and then make creation of new parcels or consolidate parcels or any of those types of changes. That's all within the city. Then we turn them over to Douglas County, who has their own property lister for the entire county. So we have myself as a staff, Colin Payton's their property appraiser, and the support staff is Lisa and Rachel. Currently, what we're doing is we're reviewing all the building permits that have been issued over the past 2020, trying to get those numbers as of January 1, which is our assessment date. We're looking at reviewing and verifying all the sales that occurred last year, and we're doing other property listing work. And at this time, we're actually getting ready to wrap up our what we call assessment year, which is the board of review, September 9th. And in that review, we're sending out notices to anybody that has had a value change, increase, decrease, or whatever, classification change, all those types of things. So we also do other things like a monthly report for the mobile home park managers, changes on ownership of those mobile homes. We provide that monthly report both to the clerk's office and to the park managers. We also do other work, including with Director Cirk, for TIF projections. We work with building information for the building inspection office and many other departments, whoever might need something. I've worked extensively sometimes with the inspectors in the fire department as well. So when they go to a property, I'm looking at it for value purposes, they're looking at it for code and other different things. So everybody's got their role of what they're doing there. I also feel it's important that we interact with the other folks out here, whether it be realtors, appraisers, the Business Improvement District, the Chamber of Commerce, and any other groups around Superior that, dealing with real estate. So why we do these things is simply to provide an equal and fair assessment for all properties within the city of Superior. So that's in general what we do right now. So I don't know if anybody has any questions at this point, and otherwise I'll go into a little bit of what a revaluation would entail.
Well, why don't we do questions at the end?
Okay.
Mr. Johnson.
So in a revaluation, what we're doing is we're going to take and review all of the properties and the property information on every property record here within the city. We're going to take a look at and review some of these land areas and compare it to the GIS mapping, make sure we have the right connections with parcel numbers and all of that, and value them together. Sometimes there's some changes in ownership may occur because the recorder's office is doing some of those things. And we're going to look at them the same way as a fee appraiser would do. The difference is we're doing it to value all the properties here, which is called mass appraiser, and they're doing it generally for some type of mortgages or disputes or something like that. So they're doing it for a specific date when their assignment comes to them. They're doing a one-on-one appraisal with that property. We're doing it to try to get a group of properties that are similarly valued and kind of do like a ranking overall based on the sales of properties that have sold. Okay? So when we're doing a mass appraisal revalue like that, what we're going to do is we're going to notify the public that, hey, we're going to come out and we're going to take a look at these properties. There's many different approaches you can take to it. You can do a certain area, or you can do a certain type of buildings, residential, commercial, or whatever. Or as the state's asking us to do, they want us to do the entire city all at one time. Now, with 2 staff members, that's a little bit difficult task. So my plan would be to do a revalue probably over the next 2 to 3 years. We're going to try to go into different areas and collect the information. Once we get that information on those properties, then we will, as I say, pull the pin and reset all the values based on what we've seen in the sales, set up our sales model and everything else, do the data analysis. We're gonna go look at all the land properties, the building properties. We're gonna do inspections as we need. We will send out some inquiries for financial information from commercial properties as well. And we'll try to develop a market survey, if you will, of what properties are, because it's all based on the market of what properties are selling and what properties are typically leasing or renting for, that type of stuff. That's probably the most difficult thing, is to get commercial information. So everything is based on the market, so we're going to do it based on the presentation I figured for January, maybe 2024 is when we would try to get it done by, but it could be whatever year we choose. So you got to realize that the sales we're looking at are for everything that's prior year, 2 or 3 years beforehand. And when we hit the value reset, basically that is now looking at the historical data. We're not staying up with the current, today's market it's not like last year. It's even the last 2 years have been pretty good, but this year's even better. So we're going to take and analyze that data, and the 3 approaches that we have available would be the sales comparison approach, which is mostly used, an income approach, which is used typically on your commercial type income properties or things like that. And the other method is the cost method, which sometimes you have to use that for unique properties, which there are no sales, larger commercial type buildings or things like that. So we create a sales model where we compare all of the adjustments that we might have for bedrooms, bathrooms, finished basements, unfinished basements, conditions and qualities and ages and locations and everything. So it's not something you can just do real quickly. It's actually pretty comprehensive. And we're looking at open market transactions where we can tell that they are which typical buyer and seller would buy. So some of these things, people are buying to flip them or rehab them and turn them over. And when we get all that done with the sales comparison model, after we've collected all this sales data and looked at all these properties, then we got to go ahead and start establishing the values on these properties based on that sales model. And that will be done for all the properties, and we're going to do that comparison. We're going to review all those values, and sometimes there are outliers, we call them, that are on one extreme or the other, where you cannot understand why they would sell for that or why they didn't sell for more or whatever it is. So we kind of throw those out. So we get all the numbers done. We're going to send a value notice at least 30 days prior to the board of review. That's when you do a revalue. We're required by law to do that. All these things I talk about are required by law. We're going to have that open book period start basically 30 days before the board of review, where people can come in, call us, we'll go look at them, review some properties, make some changes. Oh, I didn't notice that, or oh, I didn't realize that you had that issue with the basement, or things like that, or there's things that can be changed. Then we'll go to the board of review, which is for those that may not agree with our assessment of the value. They will provide us with some evidence. We will provide them with evidence of what we have to support it. And then the panel, which is independent and approved by the city council, it's up to them to make their decision. So when we are all done with all of that process, then we turn it over to and do a municipal assessment report, which is turned into the Department of Revenue for their review and approval, because they're reviewing all of this. That's probably one of the key things I didn't mention here earlier, is that we do verify all the sales, but the Department of Revenue then in turn also compiles their list of all the sales and does their own sales ratio analysis and looks at where our assessment is. And that's where they look at currently 2020, we're at just below 90%. This year, I think we're trending closer towards 85% or maybe even less than that. So, and what that is just telling us is that the market is appreciating every year for what properties are selling in comparison to our value. So once we get the municipal assessment report turned over to the Department of Revenue, all that stuff, we also have the assessment roll, which is turned over to the city clerk's office, who then turns it over to the county, who does the property tax calculations on the properties based on our value distribution, whether for the appropriate city, county, school, VOTEC taxes, and everything else. And at that point, our assessment cycle is pretty much completed. So, beginning of the year, we're turning in, we got to have by January of next year, all the sales completed for 2021. We got to have dates that the Department of Revenue sets up for all these deadlines that we have to meet. By the first Friday, I believe it is, in February, we have to have all the sales done. And we have a preliminary municipal assessment report, which is due by June, and then we do the final one, which is required to be turned in, I think it's by October, so we're always getting audited and monitored by the Department of Revenue. So they're a big part of what we have to answer to as well, not only the public here, but the Department of Revenue. So, and basically we're starting our assessment cycle January 1st, 2022, which is what we will, after the Board of Review, start hitting the field and looking at all the permits, verifying all the sales, and a bunch of other changes that may have occurred during the year. So that's pretty much the whole assessment cycle. So
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I want to thank you for coming. Part of why I hope this is going to be valuable, one of the more significant and complex questions councilors you're likely to face in our budget cycle is the subject of the revaluation. That is a expensive and complex question, and so whether you have questions tonight or come up with questions afterwards, I'd encourage you to continue these conversations with the assessor to make sure you fully understand that process. But are there questions for the assessor now? Councilor Fennessy.
I do have just a couple questions. So when we do a massive reappraisal like this, is it based home by home, or is it more of a blanket? We feel that overall we're 5% less, and so we're just going to bump everybody's up 5%, or is it truly home by home?
in the PDF that I sent to you folks, there was 4 options for doing a revalue. A full revaluation is what I had kind of estimated from other people that have actually done them, is 600 to 700,000. That requires people coming in and doing full inspections on the interior, and then also having that contracted out where they would come in, they'd have to find a place to stay, and then they're on the streets all the time. Whereas if you did an exterior inspection, exterior revalue, you're just doing it from the exterior on most of the properties. Market adjustment would be where you would look at certain segments of the market, which I think is kind of where you're talking about. Maybe we have a certain style of homes that's selling for more, or a certain neighborhood that is selling for more. So we may make some adjustments to our model. We're not going to change the model when we do the revalue. So we may make an adjustment if there's something that would indicate, statistically that we should adjust this whatever factor it is that you're looking at.
Okay. And do you have any indication, just kind of in the time that you've been here, how do you feel our property values are off? And if so, do you have any indication, or would you rather wait until this whole process is done?
Well, I have a sense that there are some inequities of things that need to be done. It's been many years since a revalue has been done, and for more specifics, we can talk on that one-on-one about that. But overall, the market has been going pretty aggressively the last 2 years prior. It's almost 8 to 9% the previous 2019 and 2020 from what we've been able to tell, and we have no indications of what it is, but I think it's going to be even more for 2021. So that's one of the biggest things is resetting that baseline, if you will, on valuation. We're seeing sales without any changes coming in anywhere between 75 to 85% of what they're being valued at. So our model needs to be updated.
Okay. And then the last question I have is, as you indicated there, there's been we've slowly seen the home values in Superior keep rising, and some have predicted that we're at the peak and we're going to go down. How does that, if we do this in 2022, and the values of the homes kind of fall back in line a little bit, but you're looking at data from 2019 and 2021, or 2020 and 2021, when we've seen home sales higher than we've ever seen before. How does that come into play?
Well, the first thing is that equalization of the property value, so everybody is on the same basis, okay? So, for example, today, if I were to take and double all the values, that's not going to change your property taxes at all, really.
Right.
So the equalization is the key to that. So if we did see a market decline, then we would adjust the entire model for the city of Superior and make an adjustment on all the values equally downward. I mean, the nice thing about it is we kind of put it in segments, which is kind of like based on certain areas and then neighborhoods within those areas, so we can make adjustments based on what we're seeing in certain areas, or maybe for a certain type of property, anything like that. So there is ways to adjust the model, but once we set that model, it's either you adjust that model or you redo the whole model. And right now it needs to be redone.
Sure. No, this has been good. Appreciate your time.
Counselor Sweeney.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Does the state dictate to us the percentage of valuation, if you would? It cannot go lower or higher?
The requirement from the state is we are supposed to be within 10% of 100% value. And the requirement is once every 5 years, you have to be in compliance. If we're not in compliance in year 4, they're going to give you a warning. If you're not in the year 5, they're going to say you need to do it, or they will come and do it. And if the state were to do a revalue, you have no appealing their values. It's out of your control. So we like to keep that local control as much as possible, because we can respond directly more to property owners and on an equal basis. And when you're setting up a model, you're trying to make it so it's equal and fair. I keep stressing, for everybody. So some people say assessors are bad people. No, we're just trying to be fair to everybody.
But did I hear you say that we may be dropping to 80-some% of?
Well, currently they're selling it, in that
Selling,
range.
okay.
They're selling. That means our assessment level overall, based on what has sold in relation to our value, we're low.
Okay, thank you. There was a controversy perhaps a year ago about the dark stores. Has that gone away now?
No, it hasn't. But
Okay.
that's something that we're not impacted by a whole lot at this point. And I've been prepared, having worked with the city of Duluth and St. Louis County, for those arguments, because I was on the tax court committee for our organization over in Minnesota, and I was handling all those tax court cases with St. Louis County as well as the city of Duluth, and fully aware of what those arguments are.
So it's still an open and live debate?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that it's a difference of opinion on how you value a property.
Sure.
So if you want to get into more detail on that, we can certainly sit and chat about that too.
Okay. And my last question is, you said you take all property. I'm assuming that's non-taxable properties too, right? Real property?
We are looking at all the properties which are taxable at this point. What we review the exempt to make sure that there's no changes in that exemption. We'll go by and look at them, but typically those are the churches, the 501c3s that have been approved and things like that, and publicly owned properties. That's a majority of them.
Right, but that doesn't go into the total assessment, right?
No, they do not.
Okay. Do you have a total record or an individual record of what those 401c3s or whatever would equal in the city of Superior?
We do not have a value on them.
Oh,
Okay, so with that, no, I don't have a value.
okay. Thank you.
Counselor Kern.
Yeah, Terry, I want to thank you for giving us a presentation today. Like you said, your job isn't always the most glamorous, but I know what you do behind the scenes and the integral part that you play within our city. I'm glad that you stressed the word equalization. Once we start talking about reassessing houses and properties, I think it gets a lot of our citizens kind of on edge. We've seen kind of what happened across the bridge, but I would like to see that, you know, maybe you can explain. I know our past assessor used the analogy of a silo, that our budget stays within our budget and we're only allowed to assess properties up to a certain tax levy, that silo is not going to change. It's the equalization of it. So I just want to make sure that anyone who might be watching today or might hear the word assessment and get triggered by it and understand that, yeah, your taxes might go up, they might go down, but we're trying to create it fair throughout all citizens in the city of Superior. So thank you for using that word and kind of explaining that. Maybe you can elaborate on the silo effect if you're aware of what I'm saying.
Sure. It's basically it's only a certain height, so all you're doing is making an adjustment to those individual layers, you might say, in that silo. The other analogy I would use is if you're squeezing a balloon. That balloon is the same size, it's got the same amount of air, but if you squeeze one and reduce those values, the other ones are going to obviously get a little bigger. So either one, whichever way. I like pie, so I like to use examples of a pie. And if you got 10 pies, 10 pieces of a pie, and you got 10 people, you give them a tenth. If you double that, now you've got half the taxes if you can get. That's what we want to expand the tax base to help reduce that tax pressure on everybody. So, silos, pie.
Further questions? Counselor Van Sickle.
I just wanted to say that if there aren't any, I know you don't expect us to be experts in this, but I think it's our responsibility to have a clue what you do. This was really helpful, and I just want to remind you to keep us in mind when, in how best this council can support you in your work and how we can best support the people that we represent. So thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Sure.
Just want to put one final call if there are any other questions. I will also thank you, Mr. Johnson, for coming. You're always welcome here.
Yes.